Today on the World Today, Israel targets major missile and sea mining production facility in central Iran. Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati also condemns Israeli actions in Lebanon as Cairo steps up diplomatic efforts to contain escalating regional tensions. The UN Human Rights Chief holds emergency debate, calls for an investigation into the unfortunate incident as soon as possible. Once again, welcome to the program. I'm Anne Nwawado. We begin in the Middle East, where Israel says that it has targeted a major missile and sea mining production facility in central Iran as Brent crude prices rose above $110 a barrel again today. Only last night, the U.S. President Donald Trump said that he was pursuing strike on Iranian energy plants by 10 days. But Iran has not publicly reacted to Mr. Trump's decision. Tehran earlier said that it was waiting for Washington to respond to its conditions for a ceasefire. Meanwhile, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, claimed that they turned back 3 vessels this morning that were trying to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. They say that 3 container ships of different nationalities attempted to proceed towards the designated corridor for authorized vessels. They were turned back after a warning from the IRGC Navy. The statement says that the Strait of Hormuz is closed and that any transit through it will be met with firm response. The passage of any vessel to and from ports belonging to allies and supporters of the U.S. and Israel to any destination and via any corridor is prohibited. Meanwhile, Gulf nations have reported strikes continuing across the region this morning. Saudi Arabia's defense ministry said that 6 ballistic missiles were fired towards the central city and capital Riyadh, and 2 were intercepted and 4 fell in the Gulf of an inhabited area. Kuwait also reported attacks on its main commercial port. The country's ports authority says that there was material damage but no human casualties. The UAE's defense ministry was not left out, as its air defenses engaged 6 ballistic missiles and 9 drones launched from Iran. Bahrain's defense force says that it has intercepted 362 drones and 154 missiles since the start of this conflict, an increase of 12 drones since the same announcement was made yesterday. However, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps have warned people crossing the Middle East to leave areas where U.S. forces are stationed and avoid being hit by missiles or drones and debris, but did not specify the exact location. In the meantime, the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF, has issued an urgent warning to people in parts of Arak, and that's the capital of Markazi province in central Iran, saying that it will conduct operations in several areas in that region in the coming hours. The Israeli military says the operation will focus on attacking the Iranian regime's military infrastructure. And for the sake of their safety and well-being, they are kindly requesting that they immediately evacuate. It also says on its Farsi account on X, adding, in their words, your presence in these areas endangers your life. Meanwhile, 18 people have already been killed in an overnight attack on the Iranian city of Qom, according to local media. Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati has condemned Israeli actions in Lebanon as Cairo stepped up diplomatic efforts to contain escalating regional tensions. Speaking after a meeting with Lebanese President Joseph Aoun in Baghdad, Abdelati says that Egypt rejects ongoing violations undermining Lebanon's security, its sovereignty and territorial integrity. Abdelati says that he conveyed the message from Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who criticized Israel's reprehensible and utterly unacceptable ground. He adds that Cairo is coordinating with multiple international partners, including France, to de-escalate the tension. Egypt is involved in mediation talks and efforts between Iran and the United States, working with regional actors such as Pakistan and Turkey to relay messages between both sides. And this comment is coming following remarks by Pakistani Foreign Minister who confirmed that indirect communication between Washington and Tehran is already ongoing. The diplomatic push now unfolds against the backdrop of a widening regional conflict following U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran on February the 28th and Tehran's subsequent retaliation across the region. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is currently meeting with his counterparts at crucial G7 talks in France. This is Marco Rubio's first foreign trip abroad since the war started. He has the inevitable task of essentially selling the U.S. strategy of the war to other G7 members, which are France, Italy, Germany, Japan, Canada, and the UK. They all released a statement several days after the war began, condemning Iran's retaliatory strikes, but notably did not comment on U.S. and Israel, who started the war. The other G7 members appear to be avoiding being struck and sucked into this war, but economic pressure may force them to take some sort of position that draws them closer. Reopening the Strait of Hormuz is one of the key issues they will be discussing. As far as Mr. Rubio is concerned, Europe owes the United States an obligation. The UN Human Rights Council has been holding an emergency debate on the strike on a primary school in Minab, that's the southern part of Iran, as a start of the war, where Iranian authorities say 168 people were killed and most of them were children. The UN Human Rights Chief, Volker Turk, also called on an investigation into the school strike to be concluded as soon as possible, adding that that incident sparked horror. The mother of two children killed in a strike on a girls' school in Iran at the outskirts of the conflict says the truth must be brought to light. Mohadesh Fahalat, speaking during the UN Human Rights Council debate on the Minab school bombing, blamed the U.S. and Israel as the cause of the suffering and said both negotiations must be held accountable. Israel's military had previously said it was not aware of any operation in that area. And while the U.S. has not accepted responsibility, it has said it is investigating the incident. U.S. media has reported that U.S. military investigators believe that American forces were likely responsible for hitting the school unintentionally, but they have not reached a final conclusion. And appearing at the UN via video link, Iran Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi called the conflict an illegal war imposed by two bullying nuclear-armed regimes. He called the strike on the school a calculated, faced assault and a war crime. Let's now join, let's have more perspective on this matter by Yinka Oyeniji, who's an international affairs analyst. Thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, only last night, the U.S. President Donald Trump said he was already pausing strike on Iranian energy plants by 10 days. Today, Israel says that it has attacked a major missile, even attacked a sea mining production facility in central Iran. What do you make of all of these?
All right. It's, I don't know if we call it a war. There are those who agree and call it a war. There are others who call it invasion. For whatever name we call it, it's got different trappings of warfare going on. And then there will be propaganda that goes along with it. I just read a few minutes ago that the Gmail account of the head of the FBI in the United States has been attacked, and that private pictures of his have been posted. So as with any war, or as with armed conflicts against between countries, between state parties, you will have propaganda as part of the instruments of war. And so if you look at Iran may say to you that its representatives may say they are not interested in negotiating, whereas privately they are probably giving the United States oil. So at this point, you cannot exactly take anything, any news coming in as being more than, as giving it more value than face value, to be honest. So even when there is a purported cessation of attacks or a suspension, it's not one to take with more than a pinch of salt. So there will be continued attacks. Cyber attacks, it will expand to other parts of the infrastructure belonging to all the parties to this war. And so even if Trump says that he's suspending attacks, would Israel say that it will suspend attacks? If Trump says that he's suspending attacks on Iran, will Israel say that it will suspend attacks on Lebanon and a few of other countries on that corridor? So I do not think that any message, for what it's worth, would really be to the fact that there will be suspension of attacks at this time. It's all part of the propaganda.
All right, let's talk about Israel's IDF. It issued an immediate evacuation warning in central Iran. It appears the U.S. haven't down its strikes on Iran. What do you think of this warning and the latest move?
All right, and then, of course, we've got to consider the humanitarian perspectives of it. It gets into a full-blown war when you start to have boots on the ground, literally, in Iran. So what the United States wants in Israel is that there will be a collapse of the regime. And a strike in central Iran will make sure of that. But I don't think that strike will happen. It's just pushing the present regime in Iran further to say, whether you like it or not, you are going to collapse. I don't think that if Israel were going to do that attacks, it would announce in advance. All right, because there are civilian casualties. It just gives Iran time also to have some soft targets around. Iran will not evacuate children and women, and no international relief agency or human rights agency would mandate that civilians be displaced from their dwelling in central Iran. So again, that by itself is propaganda. Israel will not, at this time, attack central Iran. However, there could be some casualties. I was watching your news, and I won't even say for a certainty that United States directly fired missiles at that school. But that has become a sticky point. Nobody wants the loss of lives and property at this time, especially innocent citizens. So I do not think that I would really make that judgment call to say Iran will not be attacked, at least not the central part of Iran at this point. And Israel will not be saying it has the infantry to attack central Iran, which is possibly heavily populated at this time.
We know that U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is currently meeting with his counterparts at crucial G7 talks in France, and that's his first since this war actually started. But we also understand his task there will be at selling the U.S. war strategy to member states. Do you share the same sentiments of the United States?
Totally, 100%. That's where we are at this time. Even in the United Kingdom, I just read in the news that fuel scarcity is going to be hitting some service stations this afternoon, and that's a major issue. All right, there are secondary casualties, if you like, as a result of consequences of this war. It's biting hard. All right, the world is sliding into a recession this year, whether we like it or not, because budgets will have to be reordered to acquire arms and ammunition that have now been expended. Companies will be stretched, all right? Defense contracting companies will be stretched towards trying to replace all of these armaments that have now been used. However, these countries, the G7 countries, are pivotal in trying to end this war quickly because they are more affected by the consequences of this war. The Strait of Hormuz is difficult to move oil, and so we have an increase in oil prices, and it's been fluctuating. It's also been affecting the stock market over the last couple of weeks. Except we are looking for a total recession, global recession, this war has to end soon. And those members of the G7 states will be keen to understand exactly the plan of the United States. This war cannot extend beyond the next 3 to 4 weeks. The consequences are going to be there. We've got to attend to health issues all over the world. In the United Kingdom, in Kent, we've got meningitis. And you want to move medications, you want to manufacture medications, you want to move goods and services, including oil and gas, across the Middle East. Take note that many of the airspaces in the Middle East have been shut, and so revenue are dipping seriously. So the G7 will want to understand what it will take to end this war. And then one way or the other, we won't have a choice in the matter but to de-escalate the crisis that has engulfed the Middle East over the last couple of months.
Well, Iran's effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz has now become a major bargaining power of this war. We see, as you said, secondary victims already. It's even reaching to this country, Nigeria, as well. What is your take on this, all this happening at the moment?
I think that Iran has more than held its own. To be honest, Iran has stood firm, possibly even firmer than Ukraine against Russia. All right, nobody knew. And those are some of the, I won't call them gains, but unraveling that this war has brought to the fore. Nobody would have known that Iran would be capable of sending drones, launching drones across the Middle East, and even attacking the cyberspace. All right, so Iran has shown that the next war that we are looking at, including maybe a third world war at some point, will not be conventional. All right. So if there's one good thing that this war has brought to the fore, it's shown the different capabilities of different countries, which may have been underestimated before now. So part of the bargaining chip, of course, is, you're correct, is a strength. So Iran understands the fact that it's got to be genius or disingenuous, if you like, with respect to holding its own against the United States. The United States itself would have shown to the rest of the world that we underestimate a few countries. You know the capabilities of your friends, your neighbors, your enemies, and you start to plan against it. All right. It also shows there has been a massive buildup of military warfare over the years, and those have become dissipated. So it is important. The Strait, as well as a few other spaces, including cyberspaces, data centers, are now targets. The international mega gigabyte centers are also under threat as a result of this war. So the Third World War will be catastrophic. Nations need to understand what their roles will be, where their alignment should be, even economically, when we are talking about movement of goods and services over the world. So we understand that even before economies start to crash, there are other things that will crash, and ultimately economies will crash. So it's important for nations to get towards whatever eventualities or even acts of war that are unforeseeable in the nearest future. This has shown us that there are nations that have capabilities even beyond missiles. Iran is still using drones. China hasn't come in, all right? North Korea hasn't come in firing missiles. The same thing for Russia. So it's important for nations of the world to reevaluate, especially budgetary considerations in terms of defense spending.
But are we likely to see a face-to-face U.S.-Iran talks in Pakistan anytime soon? I mean, so far, over the course of this war, we have had statements from U.S., counter-statements from Iran, so nobody seems to know what exactly will be the end of this. Do you see any face-to-face talks?
All right, I suspect that there will be face-to-face talks, but it will be bargaining chips. All right, so you won't see Trump there. Trump definitely won't be there. You may see Trump's son-in-law, including Kushner, representing him in talks. All right, so Egypt is a major player. Pakistan, interestingly, India is a major player. North Korea, a major player. Russia, major players. China. All of those will argue on behalf of Iran. And then the United States will look to the European Union and the G7 states to represent it in negotiations. Those will happen sooner than later, and they will have a direct consequence on what's going to be happening in Taiwan and what's already happening in Ukraine. It's a friend of my friend is my friend, and a friend of my enemy is my enemy. That's what it's going to come down to. There'll be face-to-face talks, definitely. There would even be a reorganization, even if it's not in the structure that we have regarding the UN Security Council. Everything is on the table, all right? This war is not only United States war. That's why you can't even have United Nations sanction United States at this time. United States is possibly doing the dirty business that other nations need to do, and Trump is staying true to the fact that he wants to put America first. Let's put America first, all right? Oil is going to come into play. All right, infrastructure building for Qatar is going to come into play. Somebody has to pay for all of this. The Gulf states require reinforcement of their air defense systems. Somebody's got to pay. So definitely face-to-face talks will hold. All right, there are so many events still down the year that will be forums for these discussions to be held, even if they don't appear to be the main agenda. But definitely face-to-face talks will happen. There will be a reordering of security priorities. And then, of course, hopefully all of the countries will come out better, reinforced with respect to their military might.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yinka Oyeniji, an international affairs analyst. Thanks a lot for your time on The World Today.
Thank you also for inviting me.
Still to come on the program, rapper turned politician Balendra Shah sworn in as Nepal's Prime Minister. Bring you the details. Please join us again. Welcome back. U.S. Senate has voted to end a partial 40-day government shutdown, approving funding for the Department of Homeland Security, excluding the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement. For almost 6 weeks, funding lapse. It has seen knock-on disruption at airports across the United States. Security workers' salaries paid by the DHS, and hundreds have already quit since the shutdown began. Democrats have refused to agree to funding deal without reforms to the U.S. Immigration and and Customs Enforcement Agency. But the Senate reached a unanimous agreement in the early hours of today after stripping ICE and parts of border protection out of the measure. The funding measures now face a vote in the House of Representatives. It is hoped that the package can bring an end to the widespread disruption at airports across the U.S., where travelers have faced hours-long queues due to a shortage of Transportation Security Administration officers at the security checkpoints. Around 50,000 agents at the TSA, which sits under the DHS, have been working without pay since mid-February due to the shutdown. And this has reduced the number of turning up to work each day and led to hundreds quitting their jobs. Nepal now has a new leader. Rapper turned politician Balendra Shah has been sworn in as the Prime Minister. That's after a landslide victory in the country's first election since last year's youth-led protest. The 35-year-old's rise marks an important shift in Nepali politics. His promise to change resonated with an electorate that was already angry at corruption, nepotism and elite rule. Before taking office today, Balendra Shah, popularly known as Balan, released a song filled with optimism about Nepal's future. He rapped in a track that garnered more than 2 million views within hours of its release, saying, "Undivided Nepali, this time history is made." The song harks back to his roots in the underground rap scene, where he used music to call out corruption and other social problems in Nepal. After just 3 years as mayor of the capital, Kathmandu, Shah teamed up with the Rashtriya Swarantra Party as its prime ministerial candidate, scoring a decisive victory in general elections this month. His supporters have seen him as a symbol of change and a break from the failings of Nepal's old guard. Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó has accused Ukraine of interfering in Hungary's domestic politics by carrying out a shameless intelligence operations targeting the country's upcoming parliamentary elections on April the 12th. He says that Ukraine has effectively turned Hungary into an operational field, and this is unacceptable. In his words, they must stop this, and this is an attack against Hungary's sovereignty. He also linked the interference to what he describes as fundamentally opposing interest between Hungary and Ukraine. He argues that Ukraine is now pushing for broader European involvement into the war, and there is no compromise between the two interests. According to him, they want Europe to finance their war with Hungarian money, but alongside the political tension, Szijjártó also warns that Europe is heading towards a severe energy crisis, citing geopolitical instability and disruptions to global supply. Prime Minister Viktor Orban has long taken a divergent position within the European Union, opposing military aid to Ukraine and resisting sanctions on Russia. Well, in recent weeks, he has also linked his opposition to the EU's €90 billion loan to Kiev to a dispute over energy supplies, accusing Ukraine of disrupting Russian oil flows through the Dazuba pipeline. A U.S. television presenter, Savannah Guthrie, is set to return to the Today Show on April the 6th, 2 months after her mother's disappearance from her home. In her first interview since Nancy went missing, she said she cannot come back to the show because it's her family. In her words, "I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I'll belong anymore, but I would like to try." Savannah Guthrie temporarily stepped away from her presenting duties after that incident. She also stood down from NBC's coverage of the Winter Olympics. In the interview with Today, she said that returning to the morning news program is part of her purpose right now, and she is not going to be the same. Well, she also says she wants to smile again, and that when she does, it will be real, and her joy will be her protest. Nancy Guthrie was last seen at her home near Tucson in Arizona on February the 1st. Investigators believe she was taken against her will, but they are yet to arrest a suspect. And that's the world today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Nwawadu. Please enjoy the rest of the weekend.